Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Grand Cat and today we are going to be looking at the Baromagnus deck list and we're going to be seeing exactly what makes it so powerful. So we're going to look over the deck first of all. So let's start with triggers. We're going to go 4 heal triggers. Those can sit right up here. We are using the 4 effect crits. It's important to use the effect crits because these do go into soul, and that can be the difference between 14 cards in soul and 15 cards in soul. And of course you need 15 cards in soul in order to get off Baromagnus effect. We have the 4 effect draw triggers, which are of course 10k shields when your opponent is on grade 3. And we have a new change. We are playing 3 other draw triggers. So we're playing 7 draws here. And I will explain that in just a bit. Of course, we're playing the over trigger. So all of the triggers are just going to sit over here in this corner. And let's move Baromagnus way for just now. You have the 4 perfect guards, the effect perfect guards, of course. Those are always required in every deck. We have the 4 brainwash swirlers, which are very, very powerful. So from this point onwards, I'm going to start explaining the card's effects. When placed, you soul charge 1, and when a card is put into soul, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets +5 until the end of the turn, and that's for every card. So it even has the example there, that if you soul charge 2, you get plus 10,000. So these guys become really, really big, really, really fast, and that's going to be a large part of the deck. It's going to be a very, very aggressive, very fast attacking deck. We are playing 3 of Cutting Sword. We used to play 4, but we're now down to 3, and I'm going to explain that as well. When this is placed in rearguard, perform all the effects based on the number of cards in soul. If you have 7 or more cards in soul, cast 1, discard a card from your hand, choose a card from your soul, add it to hand, and then soul charge 1. So it keeps the same number of cards in your soul because you remove 1 and you soul charge again. And it also keeps the number of cards in hand because you discard 1 and then you add a card from your soul back to your hand. But it lets you change the card that you want. And this whole idea of discarding cards is exactly the reason that we're playing 7 draw triggers. And the second ability is if you have 13 or more cards in soul, all of your front row units get +5 until the end of the turn. That's only the cards that are already there when this card is placed. It's not your entire front row as an effect gets +5 for the entire front row. It gets +5 for the turn. It's only the cards that are currently in the front row get the +5. So a lot of people have been playing that wrongly, including me, including everyone in KC, before we found the rulings on it. So that's something to keep in mind. The Selfish Engraver is a 4 of. It's a very, very powerful card. When the attack hits soul charge 1, you don't really care about that effect. That effect is very rarely going to actually be relevant. But the second effect is at the end of the battle, this unit attacked. If your soul has 10 or more cards, if your soul has 10 or more cards, put this into your soul to countercharge 1. So this is your countercharge engine. It's free. It doesn't need to hit, just so long as it declares an attack. Doesn't matter if it hits or not, it still goes into soul, which is still +1 card in soul as well, and it countercharges, which is very, very important. You know what, I'm going to place that here so we've got some space for the right line. We do play 2 Keenly Ludily? I've never read this card's name before. So, when this is placed on rearguard, if you're... oh my goodness, cough. When this unit is placed on... oh my god, what is going on here? Right. When this unit is placed on rearguard, if your Vanguard is Master of Gravity Baromagnus, which is what it will be, Camelaz 1, choose any number of normal units from your soul. This unit gets +5 for each card chosen, then return all the chosen cards to the deck and shuffle it. This is what stops you from decking yourself out. This is such an important, necessary part of the end game for the Baromagnus deck, so that is why we play it at 2, because if one of it goes into damage, then it's very, very difficult to get it back. In fact, nigh impossible. If it goes into soul, that's fine, because Baromagnus is going to call it from soul. If it's in your hand, you're just going to call it, you're just going to put it into soul yourself, or you can even just normal summon it and just use the effect. But normally, most of the time, you're going to be using this effect after you use Baromagnus effect to call 2 cards from soul. We have the brand new Time Jarrett Dragons, which weren't in the deck before. This is when this unit is placed on rearguard, put a card from your hand into soul and then draw a card. So this gives you more draw engine. Again, this is more of the The idea, oh, hang on, that's a little bit off camera. There we go. This is more of the idea of discarding a card from hand. It's not discarding it, it's instead putting the card into soul, which is of course +1 your soul, but also draws a card as well, which is very important. So it gets rid of these useless draw triggers, but we have more that we need to talk about. We have Curtis, who is, when this is placed on rearguard, if your Vanguard is Baromagnus, soul charge 2. And if your soul has 10 or more cards, Counterblast 2 to give all units in your front row +5 until the end of the turn. Again, that's only the cards that are currently in your front row. So you're never really going to use the Counterblast 2 effect, not unless you have the Counterblast spare and you're going for a big final rush. Because +5 isn't really all that great, especially considering that Cutting Sword over here does that for free. But the important thing of this is that he soul charges 2, and that's important. And we have our 4 Pandemonium Tactics, which is play this with Counterblast 1, Soul Charge 4, then if you're in Final Rush, and I don't need to read the rest of the effect, because the rest of the effect is all about being in Final Rush. What is important with this is the Counterblast 1, Soul Charge 4, because that is going to get you into your 15 cards in Soul very, very fast, very, very early. And then lastly, we have our Persona Rides, for Baromagnus, which are going to sit right here in the centre. So, the problem with Pandemonium Tactic is the problem with all orders is you can only play one of it per turn, and this is a grade 3 order, so you can only use it when you're on Baromagnus. So, largely you're going to do this once, and then you're never going to do it again. The reason you play it 4 is because you need to draw into it, because if you don't draw into that, then you are 4 less cards from Soul, which is a lot more difficult to get to 15 cards in Soul if you don't draw into this thing. But if you have multiple of it in hand, they are useless. And that's why you use Time Jar Dragon to put the card from hand into Soul to draw a card, to draw into something nicer. You use the effect of the Cutting Sword to Counterblast 1, discard this card from your hand, and then get a card from Soul, and also Soul Charge as well. So this is, the thing is, like, this thing is really, really good if you draw 1 of it, but if you draw 4 of it, it is useless. You know, you might as well just start discarding these for your ride line, for your ride chain, but if you draw into more of them after you've already got 15 cards in Soul, this thing is so useless. But it's so important that you play it 4, that, you know, you're forced to play it 4, because if you don't see 1 of it, then it's going to make your life quite a bit difficult. Now, before we look at the changes, let's look at the ride line for Baromagnus, and this is going to be a little bit interesting for you. So we have the Baromagnus starting Vanguard. You can use any starting Vanguard you want, of course. And then the grade 1 of our ride line, I am using Flaming Pony. So, Flaming Pony is, when this is in Soul, you can bind this card to Soul Charge 2. Now, the card that most people use, that was the original ride line for Baromagnus, is Deep Sonicor, which is when this is placed on Vanguard, Soul Charge 1, and then on rearguard effect, during your turn, if you have 10 or more cards in Soul, this unit gets plus 10,000. So the advantages to this guy is he's on play, Soul Charge 1, and later, with Baromagnus as a skill, you can Counterblast 1, call this guy out, he gets plus 10, he gets plus 10 off his own effect, so he's a 28k attacker, and that's not including if you use the effect of Cutting Sword to give it plus 5, and then it becomes 33, so it becomes really, really big. However, this card is remove it from Soul, so you're -1 Soul, and then you Soul Charge 2, which means that you are now +1 Soul, so you have the same number of cards in Soul as with Deep Sonicor, but this, you don't need to activate it immediately, you can wait, and if you wait until your grade 3 turn, then if you have Brainwar Swirler, if you have multiple Brainwar Swirlers in the field, these guys get plus 5,000 for every card put into the Soul by Soul Charge, and this is Soul Charge 2. So that means that if you call this guy, he's going to have plus 5 himself, so he's going to be 13, and then if you just use the effect of this, then that is already a 23k attacker. So this helps later game rather than early, and banishing this from your Soul doesn't really change anything. Of course, for the grade 2, we have the Electro Spartan because of his Vanguard skill. When this is rode upon by Baromagnus, put a card from your hand into Soul, draw a card, and then Soul Charge 1. So basically this is letting you get 2 cards into soul, but once again you put a card from your hand into soul, which is why we're playing 7 draw triggers. It's why we're playing the additional Pandemonium tactics, because we want to get rid of the cards in soul and we want to draw into cards that are going to let us soul charge. And when he's placed on rearguard, Counterblast 1, soul charge 2. The only time that you're going to do that is, well, the only way you're going to call it is by using the effect of Baromagnus, Counterblast 1, to call it from soul, and then at that point you're already going to have 15 cards in soul, so you're never going to use that rearguard skill. The only additional thing you can do with it is use Cutting Sword to Counterblast 1, discard a card to add this to hand, and then call it in Counterblast 1 and soul charge 2. So you can do that. And then lastly, of course, is Baromagnus himself, which for anyone that doesn't know Baromagnus' fight, let's go over it. When he attacks, Counterblast 1 and perform all the effects based on the number of cards in your soul. If you have 5 or more, you draw a card. So that's important. So Baromagnus only drive checks 2. However, that draw card means that you're going to get +3. It means that you draw 1 and you're going to drive check 2, which are both going to get added to your hand. That's not including draw triggers as well. So this card is almost a grade 4, but instead of drive checking 3, he drive checks 2 and draws a card. The second effect is if you have 10 more cards in soul, this unit gets +10,000, +1 crit until the end of the battle. So really, if you've got 10 or more in soul, you are +3ing, you're drawing a card, you're getting your 2 drive checks, but it's like you've already hit a critical trigger and you've already given it to your Vanguard, because it's got the +10 and the plus critical as well. So this really is almost a grade 4 effect. And then the last one is if you have 15 more cards in soul, both you and your opponent put all of your rear guards into soul, which gets around resist as well, because it's targeting all, not just one card. You put all your cards into soul, then you choose up to 2 cards from your soul, call them to rearguard, and those units get +10 until the end of the turn. So very, very aggressive a deck. So what Baromagnus does, when you think about it, it really has the abilities that Magnolia has, because it gets off 5 attacks. And at one time, those first attacks would only be 10k, but the Cutting Sword really helps with that, because it gives +5 to your current front row. The Brainwash Swirlers immediately become 13k on place, so they're going to be able to hit the opponent's Vanguard. These guys are 13ks. Time Dragon is 13k, so there's a lot that hits your opponent's Vanguard on your opening turn. Even if the opponent just has to guard with 5, they are still wasting cards from the hand. So you're getting off 5 attacks, and at least 2 of them are going to be massive, and possibly, the Baromagnus as well. And if you Persona Ride, it makes all of that much, much stronger as well. So it has the rush factor. It can activate when your opponent's on grade 2. This isn't a grade 4 deck, it's a grade 3, it's a grade 4 pretending to be a grade 3. The reason why it's so powerful is at the beginning of Vanguard, getting 15 cards in soul was really, really difficult. But with the fact of Pandemonium tactics and things like Brainwash Swirler, you've got so many cards here that actually soul charge, that means you can get off that 15 cards in soul really, really early. Now, I did say I was going to tell you the differences that I'd made, because this is recent changes. So originally I was playing Deep Sonica as the ride lane, so that replaced Flying Pony, which is going to sit here. The 2 Time Jarrets weren't in the deck. Instead, one of these was a 4th Cutting Sword, so he would have went here. And I also used to play 1 rear guard of Electro Spartan to just on-place Counterblast 1 and Soul Charge 2. However, I kind of prefer the idea of having these guys, because they are just on place and they are free. There's no Counterblast cost or anything, and also it lets me get rid of a lot of cards that are useless to me. And also, initially I used to play 7 criticals, but I actually took this idea from Japan and started playing the 7 draw triggers, because it lets you get off the discard of the Electro Spartan on the ride line to put a card from hand into soul. It lets you get off the effect of Time Dragons, put a card from hand into soul. It lets you get off the Cutting Sword to Counterblast 1, discard a card. It lets you get rid of a lot more cards. And of course, one of the issues with Baromagnus is sometimes when you initially get to 15 cards in soul, it will take you most of your hand. So you have to play a lot of your cards from your hand, and that really that really upsets your hand. It means you're going to have a lower hand. You're not going to be able to guard as well. But having additional draw triggers means get to draw into additional cards. It gives you more options. It lets you decide what you want to do to get yourself into that 15 cards and so. And also, at one time, you weren't guaranteed to get into 15 cards and so at all. Pandemonium Tactics really helped a lot with that. But we've seen, and also one of the other problems was you used to deck out a lot, and the Canely has helped a lot with that as well. So this deck has become a very, very powerful deck. A lot of you will have seen that Alex is currently using this. He is currently the WKC champion. I think this is a better deck than the one that Alex is using, simply because of some of the changes that I'm using. If you've seen there was a tournament that I had to do to qualify for the WKC Championship match, and I played Baromagnus against Alex's Baromagnus, and I won. So, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a better Baromagnus player, but it does mean that I've got a bit more insight as to how Baromagnus plays. And of course, we also saw Alex use Baromagnus to win the KC Championship 2022. So Baromagnus is a very, very strong deck. I lost to it with Magnolia, lost to it with Seraph Snow, and I beat it with, of course, Baromagnus. One of the issues is that Baromagnus has become quite powerful, and it is putting the players in KC off of playing other decks. So that is really the only issue with it, that it's became so strong that people are acknowledging it, because the fact that the whole deck activates on grade 3 means that if you're playing a grade 4 deck and you go second, then you have to survive in grade 2 against Baromagnus, then you have to ride into grade 3, which most of your grade 3s don't do an awful lot, especially Bruce, especially Magnolia, even to a lesser extent Nirvana. And then you have to survive that grade 3 turn as well before you get a chance to go into your grade 4 turn, and by that time you've already lost so many cards in hand because you've had to guard 5 attacks off of Baromagnus 3 times. So, and of course, Baromagnus always has the plus 10 and plus critical, and that's not including if you get the overtrigger, because if you get the overtrigger early, then Baromagnus instead has plus 20,000 and plus 2 crit. So he then becomes 33,000. And if you Persona Ride, then he's going to be 43,000 with 2 crit, and that's before you even hit any triggers. So it's a very, very powerful deck. It's very, very strong. It's one of the fastest, if not the fastest deck in the game. The fastest rush deck. It's very difficult to play against. Also, this deck doesn't require much thought. It's a very, very auto-play deck. It doesn't require an awful lot of skill. It's just a case of choosing, okay, I'm going to do this card to Soul Charge 2, I'm going to choose this card to Soul Charge 4, I'm going to use this card, and then I'm going to choose one of these cards to put into Soul. And just the order that you play it in is really the only part where skill comes into it, because you don't have to worry about Counterblast. If the opponent damage denies you, you've got these guys. And even if you don't draw into them, you will likely Soul Charge them, and it's not difficult to get 15 cards in Soul, and Baromagnus is only Counterblast 1, it's not Counterblast 2, it probably should be Counterblast 2, because it's quite powerful. And the only thing that I find confusing is that I've not seen as many people winning with this deck online, and the only reason I can think of is that people just haven't realised how good it is. And of course, Baromagnus becomes even stronger in set 6, because we have a new card that says, I believe it's Counterblast 1 and as an act, and whenever you would Soul Charge, you Soul Charge an additional card. So that means the Brainwash Swirler is Soul Charging 2, it means that Curtis is Soul Charging 3, it means that Pandemonium Tactics is Soul Charging 5, so it just becomes a much easier way to actually get that 15 card in Soul, which is going to make it even faster, which is going to make it even more reliable, which is going to make it even more ridiculous. And also the thing with Cutting Sword is once you've got that 15 cards in Soul, this thing becomes absolutely ridiculous. Generally, you can't blast 1 for Baromagnus effect, and you'll bring out a Cutting Sword, and you'll bring out a Selfish Engraver. Selfish Engraver is going to go back into Soul to unflip the damage that you just paid, and Cutting Sword is going to give +5 to the front row as well, but in addition, Cutting Sword, you can use that skill to get perfect guards, or if your over trigger is in the soul, use that to get it back to your hand, and then you've got a massive defense as well as being very, very aggressive. So it does both of those things, which is very, very dangerous. And also, Keenleys, once you get into the late game, when you've only got a few cards left in deck, you're going to call this out, you're going to Card 1, and you're just going to put so many cards back into your deck, and it is going to get +5 for each of them as well. So it's going to be absolutely massive, and you've got so many massive attacks. The opponent is only going to have a limited number of perfect guards that they can use to just negate your attacks, and the rest of it, they're going to have to be counting up, okay, this is 15, this is 15, this is +10, and so on and so forth, and they're going to have to be discarding their hand every single time. And also because you're getting 5 attacks each turn, they're not going to waste perfect guards on the smaller attacks. They're going to have to be discarding cards from their hand if they don't want to take that damage early as well. So it's a very, very strong deck. Generally, it doesn't really do much before the grade 3 turn. There are ways to make the deck play before the grade 3 turn if you start playing Crimson Expellers and things, because Crimson Expeller is when he declares an attack soul charge 1, and you can play some other things that soul charge early. But generally, if you just wait until your grade 3 turn and then you just drop your hand, it's very, very difficult for the opponent to actually come back from that. So that is going to be the end of this little video, folks. I really hope that you all enjoyed seeing this lovely little Baromagnus deck list and the explanation and the review of the deck. So really hope that you all enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please give us a like, share and subscribe, and if you are subscribed, make sure you click that notification icon so you can see when more of these videos go up, and we will see you all in the next video. Goodbye, everybody.